Hello and welcome everybody. So today it's time arrived to show you the King's Gambit, one of the most popular and most playable chess opening for many years. So hundreds of years. We are running analysis and discussions about if it's possible to play King's Gambit or it's too risky. Let's say about 500 years ago, for the first time, this e4, e5 and f4 line was played, and since then we call the style of the opening the Italian style. So because the King's Gambit usually considered by many the very tricky, very risky opening, but despite the fact white is immediately from the opening going to sacrifice the pawn, and white is not going to get this pawn back. White is getting just great compensation in many lines, and it's not a surprise that even today the King's Gambit is quite often guessed in tournament practice. So let's understand exactly what the main point of the f4 move. As we know, after e4 and f5, black is trying to take control over the center, and by playing f4 we are trying to eliminate black's pawn on e5. But you can ask, of course, but we are challenging the e5 pawn with the f pawn, which also opens completely our king side, and black is almost always could protect this pawn by capturing and then play g5. Where is our compensation? So also I would like to tell you that after e takes f4, the move which we call the main line, they were playing just thousands and thousands of games, and already in 1620 Gioacchino Greco, I would say the father of Italian Gambit style, posted in his book very nice analysis. So I just like to show you a few. e4, e5, f4, e takes f4, knight f3. So black, according to the usual rules, of course, could continue like knight c6 or d6, but why not just to protect the pawn and to ask why? Why exactly? Why decided to play f4 and to sacrifice the pawn? So now we can get some answer. After black's pawn left the e5 square, white could immediately try to play for the center. So it's possible already now to play d4, and we'll look later on that d4 is one of the main continuation in today's theoretical line. But first of all, in Greco analysis, of course, we were trying to understand the main points of the Italian Gambit style. So he played bishop c4, immediately posing the bishop towards the f7 pawn. So as usual, f7 pawn is the weakest spot in black's position. So of course h4 is just one of the most critical continuation, which by the way used to play even by the world champion Boris Alterman. And I could tell you also that according to Fischer, the King's Gambit is not so easy opening to play against. So I could tell you that according to the information we have, Fischer just spent a lot of time and energy trying to find just a optimal solution of how to play against King's Gambit. It means that Fischer just was considering King's Gambit as a very dangerous opening line. So in line which I would like to show you from the Greco book, so he said that f6, let's say, trying to protect this g5 pawn cannot be recommended because white is coming with the immediate nice shot knight take g5, and easy we can understand the main problem of the f6 move. So after f take g5, queen h5 check, king e7, white plays simply queen takes g5, and now on knight f6, queen e5 coming. This is already checkmate. And in case black is playing king e8, of course we are not going to catch this rook on h8 because we have just much better target. So check on h5 first, and after king e7, queen e5. So this is one of the first lines from the book of Greco, which we studied. And already in this first, I would say, theoretical line, almost 500 years ago, so we can see the great potential in white's attack in the king's gambit. So let's look at second line, which also, even today, is quite playable. So after e4, e5, f4, e takes f4. Greco also recommended for white here to play bishop c4. So after knight f3, in general, we are preventing black's queen from going to h4, just checking our king and our white's king losing the castling rights. But after bishop c4, white could get just simply other advantages. First of all, the central is under control, so black cannot play d5 anymore. Queen h4 check. Funny, but even today bishop c4 is quite playable move. I just would like to tell you that a few years ago, our brilliant grandmaster Vasily Ivanchuk played the King's Gambit in the decisive game, in the tie-break for the European title against Predrag Nikolic, and won very convincingly just after 20-something moves. So, as you can realize, the bishop c4 has so long history already. So bishop c4, queen h4 check, king f1. So how could we evaluate the position? So black really played queen h4. Black still has pawn up, but we can look more in deep regarding this position. White is intending now to play knight f3 and to attack the queen to h4. So one of our rules says that developing the queen too early in the opening cannot be recommended. And in this situation also, queen h4, king f1, the position remains very unclear, despite the fact still that white is having pawn down. So, thanks to knight f3, d4, knight c3, white is not only achieving quite strong pressure in the center, but also getting just quite serious development advantage. So all the rules according what we are studying in our Gambit guide, it's just very I would say typical even for the King's Gambit, so even more typical than unusual Gambit lines. So here, as the theory recommends, even to play d7, d5, trying to open the position because white's king is still in the center and cannot castle in the near future. And the d5 move also opens somehow the diagonal for the bishop on c8. Indeed, in Greco analysis just considered bishop c5 move. Of course, the most obvious, I would say, way for some players like 500 years ago. Of course, white simply destroys this nasty idea by playing d4. So now f4 square is under our control. As well, white won another tempi for getting out all black pieces, because next move is knight f3. Almost automatically sends away the queen from h4. After bishop b6, knight f3, and queen g4. Already here we can realize that typical combination: bishop takes f7, king takes f7, knight e5. Just white found just great targets for the knight. So this knight e5 double check decides the game. Of course, black has to play something like king e7 or king d8, but still the evaluation of position is just obvious. White is having great advantage after knight c3, threatening knight d5, threatening bishop takes f4. Once again, black cannot capture f7 bishop and not f4 bishop later on. So look at that situation. White is having just all his pieces in the game. Black is queen on g4, king on e7 is not exactly the main idea of the theoretical of the theory in the king's gambit, when black is playing only with the queen and only with the king. So a king's gambit becomes just one of the most, I would say, playable and dangerous openings. So if we look at the games we're playing between between 1600 to almost 1900, maybe 80% of the game were continuing with the same line. Means e4, e5, f4, e takes f4, and only in the 19th century. So here this position was detailed, analyzed by many chess players and also by greatest German chess player Adolf Andersen and John Cohen from England, and definitely the biggest impact of developing the theory here we pay to William Steinitz and of course the greatest and brilliant chess player, the Paul Morphy. So I would like just to show you a few games which were playing between 1845 for 50 years, before starts of the 20th century. And you can realize that in all these games white was just following the critical and the most important ideas of the gambits. So of the gambits play. What I mean, most important points we already studied. So when you have developed an advantage, bring all your pieces very fast in the game. Second, when you have developed an advantage, try to open position as soon as possible, using the files and diagonals for attack against the opponent's king, and always try to keep the initiative. Don't look so much about material, so just try to follow the main attacking rules. If you have the advantage, you have the initiative, you have to attack, otherwise you would lose the game. Okay, so next important game, I would say, was played again between Daniel Horwitz and Adolf Andersen from the Breslau match in 1848. Bishop c4, Queen h4 check, King f1, Bishop c5, d4 and Bishop b6. So of course black considering this d4 move, but I guess that because Adolf Andersen decided that the best square for the queen would be e7, so he decided just to develop first the bishop, not to lock it on f8. Naturally white is playing knight f3, and black answered queen e7, knight c3, knight f6. So black has to develop his pieces, but now e4, e5. Already now we can just pay attention that black did not solve all the problems. White is getting just so strong center, hardly even black could use the bad position of the king on f1. So very soon white would capture the pawn on f4. That's why black is trying to counterattack with knight h5. Knight d5, queen d8. Now very, very important, very interesting position. Of course white could simply capture on f4 here. Let's say to play knight takes f4, knight takes f4, bishop takes f4. But after d5 the situation is not that clear. Definitely white is slightly better, because even after bishop d3 and then king f2 and rook f1. So we are just simply transposing the king to g1 and then to h1 to the safe place and having quite good attacking opportunities on the king side. But definitely in such a position when we have all the pieces already in the game and black's king is still in the center, it looks like we could ask for more. And Daniel Horowitz find the greatest solution in this position. He played g4, sacrificing one more pawn, but after f take g3, bishop g5. So bishop is coming to attack the queen on d8. So we already could smell something bad is happening for black's position, since f6 is only answer. And after e takes f6, g takes f6, white is just killing black's king by another tactical sacrifice. So it's not so difficult once again to find it. Look at that. White's queen is looking towards the knight on h5. That's why knight e5 move is not a big surprise. So suddenly black is totally lost. We just played 13 moves, but the position already completely lost for black. Hopeless. So only move now is short castling. It's clear that knight g7 will be made by knight takes f6 and black has to give the queen. After short castling, queen takes h5 and f take g5. Look at that, interesting. Black is checking white's king. Discovery check this position. So white is just simply playing knight f6. King h8 will be made by queen takes h7 checkmate. Then king g7. White is also forcing the mate the most beautiful way. Queen takes h7, so sacrificing one more piece, and finally checkmate is coming. So Adolf Anderssen was not only winning the brilliant games with the King's Gambit. By the way, I don't like just to show his famous game against Dufresne, because he just already coming from one book to another book with just great analysis. So I believe that you could find it by studying one of the books about the King's Gambit. So the greatest games also played by Adolf Anderssen. But I would like to continue with the Cochran's game. So after e4, e5, in 1850 fine against Matthew Skander, he played in Calcutta. f4, e takes f4, knight f3, g5, bishop g4, and g4. So this is quite interesting position. We call it Muzio attack, because after the black is playing g5 and g4, white has just quite serious decision to make. Because if you play with the knight to e5, black is playing knight, queen h4 check, the knight h6 covering the f7 pawn, for instance. And the position remains quite unclear. Of course, if we are following the main rules how to play in the gambits, that short castling, this is the main and the most important continuation. Despite the fact that white is sacrificing a piece after g takes f3 and queen takes f3, it's not so simple to play here with black. So queen f6 was played. So black is trying to exchange some pieces. After queen takes f4, queen takes f4, rook takes f4, knight h6. Black is still with the piece up. e5. So already in 1854, this e4, e5 move was one of the main continuations. Queen takes e5. d3. Later analysis shows that even possible here for white to play bishop takes f7, sacrificing one more piece. King takes h7, d4. sacrificing one more pawn, queen takes d4 and bishop e3, getting very unpleasant initiative. So maybe we will look at this position later on. White is having two pieces down, but black's king is absolutely opened. So just lone king against the all white's army. But I would say 150 years ago, the main continuation was just simply d3. White is protecting the bishop on c4 and threatening to play bishop takes f4. Continue attacking, but without sacrificing material. Bishop h6, knight c3, knight c6, bishop d2. It's quite funny that with this position we're playing many games, and thanks to the strong threat rook e1, black forced to play knight e7, rook e1. Where to play? Queen f5, knight comes to d5, threatening knight takes c7 as well. King d8, only move. Bishop c3. I know that in this position today the analysis shows that white is keeping here quite serious advantage, and for black is much better to avoid this line. But the game of Cohen against Mehen's Kandra continued bishop c3, rook g8, bishop f6, bishop f8, queen e2, queen e6, and now white played knight takes e7. So probably queen. After knight takes e7, the position already very difficult for black, since queen takes e6 will be met by knight takes e6 check and queen e8 checkmate. So white just completed all the development of his pieces, and just quite difficult to stop white's attack anymore after knight takes e7. So queen takes f6 not possible, queen takes e2. Now we come with a double discovered check, knight takes e6 check, king e8, rook takes e2, and black resigned. Just he's under mating attack, bishop e7, rook takes e7, king f8, rook takes e7. Anyway, what I would like to pay your attention to the position after bishop f6. So white is having just all his pieces in the game. Black's, look at that, bishop f8, bishop c8, rook e8 are not playing at all in this situation. So white is just getting quite serious development advantage, and that's why it's not so easy for black to defend the position like this, like it happened in the King's Gambit. And now I would like just to follow with the games of Paul Morphy. So almost impossible to cover this great opening line without the games of greatest American genius. So Paul Morphy against Alexander Meek, played in Alabama 1855. e4, e5, f4, e takes f4, knight f3, g5, bishop c4, bishop g7. And now what I would like to pay attention. So black is not playing g4 allowing the Mutsu attack, but played immediately bishop g7. So we can play d4 of course on knight c3, but in this game Paul Morphy is using one of the main ideas. He plays h4, attacking black's pawn on g5. So Thier recommends here just to answer with h6, not allowing white to destroy the structure on the king side. The g4 cannot be recommended, the game which choose by Mick. Knight g5. Knight h6. d4, f6. And no need to ask twice for Morphy. So he's immediately sacrificing the piece after bishop takes f4. So black is forced to capture. So because king cannot castle anymore. H takes. g5. Bishop take g5. Bishop f6. And as usual, continue his attack. So it was possible even to capture on h6, but I believe Morphy decided to avoid any counterplay with bishop takes h4 check. So he just simply played queen d2, classical way of playing gambits. So instead going for material, we just develop pieces. Bishop take g5. H take g5. Knight f7. Bishop takes f7, removing the only defender of black's king side. King takes f7. Queen f4 check. So now we can realize that black is in big trouble. King g8. Castling short side. Queen e7. And now come one more piece in the game. Knight c3. So threatening knight d5 with a decisive threat already. Still the same picture we see. Look at that. All black pieces are still on the back rank. c6. Rook a to e1. So Morphy just simply continued developing his pieces. So d6. Black is trying to bring the bishop maybe on e6, but it's too late. Knight d5. Game is over. C takes d5. E takes d5. Look at that. White pieces are dominating, so black has no chance, no way to stop the checkmate. Queen d7, queen f8, checkmate. Queen g7, rook e8, checkmate. Queen, where to go? Queen d8, here checkmate. And even queen takes e1 is not enough because white first of all giving the checkmate as well. Game is over. So just a few games we started to look on the King's Gambit and we could realize how difficult to play this position with black, because white from the very early start is trying to destroy black's position in the center. So after playing f4 and allowing even black going for the more material advantage, but trying to get to bring all his pieces very fast in the to the center squares, capturing the center, and to bring all this domination and all this initiative as a kingside attack. So usually in the King's Gambit, black's king stuck in the center for a while. So that's why it's just greatest target for our pieces. So today we just only started to overview the main ideas of the King's Gambit, and we know that Greco started to analyze the King's Gambit already almost 500 years ago. So it's about 400, but I mean in general it's also greatest chess players of the 18th century as Adolf Andersen, John Corrin, Paul Morphy, and others as Daniel Horwitz were using this opening line as the main line in their opening repertoire, and only later on we will study more in deep the new ideas which were discovered by Wilhelm Steinitz and afterward by the Mikhail Chigorin, who used just to play this King's Gambit as one of his greatest weapons. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. So follow me the next week for the second part of the King's Gambit. I wish you all the best. See you. Bye.